Pokémon is one of the most historical game franchises ever. They are the best-selling media franchise of all time and continue to sell tens of millions of copies with each new release. However, some would say that the new games have been a huge drop in quality compared to the original entries. Things feel dumbed down and geared to the lowest common denominator. But how exactly did this happen? Today on Poseidon Films, we explored the sad decline of Pokémon. Be sure to press the like button to guarantee your next Pokémon encounter will be a shiny with perfect IVs. The Pokémon franchise, which began with the groundbreaking release of Pokémon Red and Blue in the late 1990s, was nothing short of a revolution in gaming. These games captured the imaginations of millions with their innovative mechanics, intricate world building, and the strategic depth required to truly master the game. Players were thrust into a vibrant world filled with 151 unique creatures, each with its own strengths, weaknesses, and abilities. The challenge of catching them all, while battling through gyms and thwarting the plans of the nefarious Team Rocket, was not just a test of skill, but of dedication and strategy. Red and Blue laid the foundation for what would become one of the most beloved and successful gaming franchises of all time. As the franchise expanded, each new installment brought fresh ideas and refinements. Pokémon Gold and Silver introduced a real-time clock, day-night cycles, and a new region with 100 additional Pokémon, pushing the boundaries of what the series could be. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire further expanded the gameplay with double battles and abilities, adding layers of strategy that seasoned players eagerly embraced. Pokémon games were known for their balance of accessibility for newcomers and depth for veterans, a formula that kept the franchise both engaging and challenging. However, as the years went by, something began to change. The fan base that had grown up with the series in the 90s and early 2000s matured, but the Pokémon games began to evolve in a different direction. The developers at Game Freak seemed to realize that a significant portion of their audience was not the seasoned gamers who had been with them since the beginning, but rather a younger generation of players. As a result, the series gradually shifted towards a more simplified, accessible experience, with each new release becoming increasingly geared towards younger children. This shift was first noticeable in Pokémon X and Y, where the introduction of the experience share as a core mechanic significantly lowered the difficulty curve. What was once a strategic decision to use or not to use the experience share became a default that removed much of the challenge in leveling up a balanced team. Battles that once required careful planning and a deep understanding of type matchups and movesets became straightforward affairs where victory was almost guaranteed, regardless of the player's skill level. As the series progressed, the simplification continued. Pokémon Sun and Moon, while praised for their narrative and world building, further streamlined the experience. The removal of gyms in favor of trials, while innovative, also made the path to the Pokémon League more linear and less challenging. The games began to hold the player's hand, guiding them through every step of the journey, with tutorials and hints that left little room for exploration or discovery. By the time Pokémon Sword and Shield were released, the shift towards a younger demographic was undeniable. These games, while visually impressive and packed with content, lacked the depth and challenge that had defined earlier entries in the series. The Wild Area, a new feature meant to evoke a sense of open-world exploration, was undercut by a lack of meaningful difficulty. Even the game's story, which had moments of brilliance, was ultimately simplified to ensure it was easily digestible by the youngest of players. The core mechanics of Pokémon remained, but the games had become easier, more straightforward, and less demanding. Puzzles that once required thought and persistence were replaced by simple tasks. Battles that once tested the player's strategic thinking were now won with ease, as the AI opponents rarely posed a real threat. The games were still fun, still charming, and still able to evoke the nostalgia that many players felt for the series, but they were no longer the challenging adventures that had once captivated a generation of gamers. This shift didn't go unnoticed by the older fans. Many longed for the days when Pokémon games were tough, requiring not just time, but skill to master. They missed the complexity and challenge that had made the early games so rewarding. However, the reality was that the franchise had become so successful by appealing to the broadest possible audience, which now included a large number of very young children. Game Freak, it seemed, had made a conscious decision to prioritize accessibility over difficulty, to ensure that Pokémon remained a welcoming entry point into the world of gaming for new generations. In a way, Pokémon's evolution from a challenging, strategic RPG to a more simplified, child-friendly adventure reflects the broader changes in the gaming industry, where accessibility and inclusivity have become key priorities. While this has undeniably made the games more approachable for new players, it has also left many longtime fans feeling alienated, longing for the days when catching them all wasn't just a tagline, but a real challenge. The Pokémon games are still successful, still beloved by millions, but they are no longer the games that required the patience, strategy, and skill that once defined the series. The gaming industry has undergone a dramatic transformation over the past few decades, shifting its focus from creating high-quality, immersive experiences to maximizing profits. Once, the primary goal of game developers was to craft innovative, memorable games that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in digital entertainment. These games were labors of love designed to captivate players with rich stories, complex gameplay, and polished mechanics. However, as the industry has grown into a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, the priorities have shifted. Today, many game studios, especially the larger ones, are driven more by the bottom line than by a passion for creating great games. The result is a landscape where quick, profitable releases often take precedence over the quality and integrity of the final product. This shift is perhaps most evident in the annualized release cycles that have become common in the industry. Major franchises now churn out new titles every year, with developers given increasingly tight deadlines to deliver games. This approach has led to a disturbing trend where games are released unfinished, riddled with bugs, and lacking the polish that once defined the industry's best work. Instead of taking the time to refine and perfect their games, many developers now rely on post-launch patches to fix issues, a practice that would have been unthinkable in the early days of gaming. The emphasis is on getting the game to market as quickly as possible, capitalizing on pre-orders, and riding the wave of hype, even if it means compromising on quality. Game Freak, the studio behind the Pokémon franchise, is a prime example of this phenomenon. Pokémon is one of the most successful and beloved franchises in gaming history, with a massive, dedicated fan base. However, in recent years, Game Freak has faced increasing criticism for what many see as a decline in the quality of their games. Despite these criticisms, Pokémon games continue to sell in staggering numbers, driven by the strength of the brand alone. Game Freak has seemingly realized that they don't need to release a polished, fully realized game to achieve massive sales. They just need to release a Pokémon game. This has led to a pattern where Game Freak releases new Pokémon titles on an almost annual basis, often with significant compromises. Features that were once standard are now stripped away, replaced with simplified mechanics and minimal content. Graphics and animations, which could be a major selling point for a franchise as visually iconic as Pokémon, often feel dated and rushed. Yet despite these shortcomings, the games still sell millions of copies simply because they carry the Pokémon name. The reason for this is clear. Pokémon has become more than just a game series, it's a cultural phenomenon. For many fans, buying the latest Pokémon game is not just about playing a game, it's about being part of a larger community, reliving childhood memories, and staying connected to a world they love. Game Freak and its parent companies, the Pokémon Company and Nintendo, are well aware of this, and they've leveraged it to their advantage. They know that the Pokémon brand is strong enough to sell games, even if those games are released in an unfinished state. This approach, while profitable, has led to a growing sense of disillusionment among longtime fans. Many feel that the magic and innovation that once defined the series have been replaced by a focus on quick, easy profits. The games no longer push the boundaries or challenge players in the way they once did. Instead, they play it safe, offering just enough new content to keep fans interested, but not enough to truly impress or innovate. The broader gaming industry is not immune to this trend. Many AAA developers and publishers have adopted similar strategies, prioritizing annual releases, microtransactions, and other revenue-generating features over the quality of the games themselves. The result is a market flooded with games that feel rushed, shallow, and more concerned with monetization than with providing a rich, rewarding experience. This isn't to say that all hope is lost. There are still developers out there who prioritize quality, innovation, and the player experience above all else. Indie games, in particular, have become a beacon of creativity and craftsmanship in an industry increasingly dominated by corporate interests. These games remind us of what gaming can be when it's driven by passion rather than profits. In the end, the shift towards profit-driven development has fundamentally changed the gaming landscape. While this approach has led to unprecedented financial success for many companies, it has also eroded the trust and loyalty of many players. Game Freak's handling of the Pokémon franchise is just one example of how a focus on quick profits can come at the expense of the very qualities that made these games beloved in the first place. As long as the games continue to sell, there's little incentive for change, but if the industry continues down this path, it risks losing what made gaming special in the first place. The joy of playing a game that was crafted with care, creativity, and a genuine love for the medium. Over the years, the Pokémon franchise has become synonymous with creativity, innovation, and an ever-expanding roster of unique creatures that have captured the hearts of fans around the world. When Pokémon Red and Blue first hit the scene, the original 151 Pokémon were meticulously designed, each with its own distinct personality, backstory, and place within the Pokémon world. These designs felt fresh, imaginative, and perfectly aligned with the game's lore, contributing to the deep connection players felt with their favorite Pokémon. However, as the franchise has grown and the demand for new games has increased, the quality of Pokémon designs has noticeably declined. The pressure to release a new game almost every year has forced Game Freak to churn out new Pokémon at an unsustainable rate. Instead of taking the time to develop designs that are thoughtful, creative, and true to the spirit of the original games, the focus has shifted to quantity over quality. This has led to a significant drop in the originality and coherence of many newer Pokémon designs. In the earlier generations, Pokémon designs were often inspired by real-world animals, myths, and natural elements, with each design carefully crafted to fit into the game's lore. The Pokémon felt like they belonged in their environment, with abilities, typings, and evolutions that made sense within the context of the world. But as the series has progressed, many designs have become increasingly abstract, uninspired, or even downright bizarre. The sense of cohesion that once defined the Pokémon world has been compromised in favor of meeting tight development deadlines. One of the most glaring consequences of this rushed design process is the frequent breaking of the franchise's own established lore. In the past, Pokémon lore was treated with care, with each new addition to the Pokédex carefully integrated into the existing world. But as the number of Pokémon has swelled to over 1,000, it's become increasingly difficult for Game Freak to maintain the consistency and depth that once made the series so immersive. For example, earlier Pokémon generations introduced legendaries and mythicals with clear, well-defined roles in the Pokémon world, often tied to the game's overarching story. These Pokémon were rare, powerful, and steeped in mystery, with lore that connected them to the history and mythology of the world they inhabited. But in more recent games, the introduction of new legendaries and mythicals has often felt forced and inconsistent, with little regard for the established lore. The sheer volume of new Pokémon introduced in each generation has diluted the significance of these once special creatures, making them feel more like obligatory additions than meaningful expansions of the world. Additionally, some new designs have raised eyebrows for their simplicity or lack of creativity. Pokémon that resemble everyday objects, like an ice cream cone or a set of keys, have sparked debates among fans about whether the designs have strayed too far from the series' roots. While the Pokémon franchise has always included a mix of fantastical and more whimsical designs, the balance seems to have tipped in recent years, with many designs feeling more like placeholders than fully realized concepts. The rapid pace at which new games and Pokémon are released also leaves little time for refining and perfecting designs. In the past, Game Freak could afford to spend years developing a new generation of Pokémon, ensuring that each design was polished and coherent. Now, with annual releases and the pressure to constantly deliver fresh content, the development team is forced to cut corners. This not only affects the quality of individual Pokémon designs, but also the overall cohesion of each game's ecosystem, leading to a world that feels increasingly disjointed. Moreover, the need to constantly introduce new mechanics and gimmicks to keep the series feeling fresh has sometimes resulted in designs that prioritize function over form. Mega Evolutions, Gigantamax forms, and regional variants have all added interesting twists to the gameplay, but they've also contributed to a sense of design fatigue. All of these factors rushed development, the pressure to release new content annually, and the need to appeal to a broad, often younger audience have taken their toll on the creativity and quality of Pokémon designs. What was once a hallmark of the franchise has become a source of frustration for many longtime fans who feel that the magic of discovering new Pokémon has been lost in the rush to meet deadlines and satisfy market demands. That is how the decline of Pokémon started. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to press the like button and let me know in the comment section down below if you agree. If you like gaming videos like this, be sure to check out the channel because we post videos like this regularly. Our last video was about the Brotherhood of Steel faction from Fallout, and I think you guys would enjoy it. We are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers this year and would love your guys' help. Thank you for watching.